Destiny 2 is a weird game because sometimes an item description will tell you that it does one thing, yet in-game it can be totally different or have a unique effect that isn't listed anywhere else. And sometimes these hidden effects are very important to be mindful of because they can totally change how you perceive or use the item in question. And with the Edge of Fate being right around the corner, I thought today would be a good opportunity to present you with 25 of the game's most unique and awesome hidden interactions that you should know going into the Edge of Fate. And if you like this type of content, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe, since it seriously goes a long way. And with that, let's begin, starting with Mask of Bakris. In the item description for Mask of Bakris, it states that after performing a light shift, your stasis and arc weapons deal increased damage for a short time, which in actuality translates to 11 seconds of 4x stasis or arc weapon surge. But did you know that this also applies to Lord of Wolves? Yup, after performing a light shift, Lord of Wolves also gains 11 seconds of solar weapon surge, despite there being no mention of this effect in the item description, which in the Edge of Fate is actually getting changed to a plus 10% stacking damage bonus for all eligible weapons, including Lord of Wolves, that stacks up to 3 times, meaning that at 3 stacks you're doing 30% more damage that stacks with well, surges, etc. And since we know that Lord of Wolves isn't getting nerfed again thanks to the weapons TWID that released on Thursday, I would definitely keep this interaction in mind since Lord of Wolves is still incredibly strong. Moving on, we have the Titan exotic Blastwave Striders that have a hidden interaction with Alethanim. Getting kills with Blastwave Striders equipped charges up a meter on the left of the screen that once full allows you to perform a special slide that propels you backwards, causing you to eject a bunch of shrapnel projectiles that spawn in stasis crystals on contact and grant you frost armor. But did you know that collecting vestiges created by Alethanim also charges the Blastwave Striders meter? Each vestige grants about 10% of your meter energy, which is really quite nice if you're choosing to run this exotic, which as a side note isn't the strongest one out there, but it is a fun interaction regardless. The Touch of Malice exotic scout rifle from the King's Fall raid features an alternate fire mode that unleashes a taken Captain Blight at your target, and blighted enemies receive 50% more damage from Touch of Malice. But did you know this also extends to all other weapons of sorrow? Weapons like Thorn or Osteostriga also deal 50% more damage to targets affected by the Touch of Malice Blight, and by the way, the Blight itself lasts for around 5 seconds. In a similar vein, both Wishender and Malfeasance deal 25% more damage to any target that is struck by Witherhoard's Blight, as in a teammate sticks an enemy with Witherhoard, allowing you to deal bonus damage to them with both Wishender and Malfeasance. Next up, we have the exotic Exderis grenade launcher, which normally after scoring a kill creates a singular arc moth that seeks out targets and explodes, but if you happen to be on a hunter and are wearing the Mothkeeper's Wraps exotic gauntlets, each kill with Exderis will now also spawn a loyal void moth that returns to you and grants a void overshield, a small synergy that I absolutely love, by the way. Circling back to the weapons of sorrow once again, they too have awesome synergies with the Warlock exotic gloves Necrotic Grip, whereby getting kills with them creates a poison explosion, and specifically Necrochasm gains a unique behavior that otherwise isn't possible. Normally, the Curse Thrall explosions can only be triggered via precision kills, but with Necrotic Grip, defeating a poisoned enemy, no matter if it's a headshot or not, will create a Curse Thrall explosion, giving it way more ease of use. While we're here actually, it should also be noted that the Curse Thrall explosions triggered by Necrochasm are in fact arc damage rather than kinetic damage. I have a whole video detailing the unique arc synergies that Necrochasm possesses if you're keen to learn more. The Warlock Boots of the Assembler allow your Rifts and Well of Radiance to create Noble Seekers that chase after your allies and grant them either damage buffs or healing. But did you know that if you have the exotic Hand Cannon Lumina equipped, collecting a Noble Seeker grants a Noble Round to Lumina, which to be fair isn't the most useful thing in the world, but in the event where you need a Noble Round to say hit a Lumina grapple skip, and there are sadly no ads around, you can self-generate a free Noble Round by simply placing a Rift with Boots of the Assembler equipped. Lumina and Noble Seekers from Boots of the Assembler also trigger the Ember of Benevolence fragment, despite not being tied to the Solar toolkit in any way. So definitely keep this in mind, especially since they are receiving a major buff in the Edge of Fate that's almost certainly placing them as the new default DPS exotic. The Arc Hunter aspect Ascension is a bit of a weird one since despite using your class ability doesn't currently trigger any class ability focused mods like Powerful Attraction or Bomber or any ability regen exotics like Heart of Inmost Light, which is being fixed in the Edge of Fate by the way, but also Ascension has this rather odd property where it inherits the perks of your equipped swords, which becomes especially apparent when using Ergo Sum. Take this Ergo Sum with the Stormbringer trait. If I have it held and use my Ascension in a group of enemies, a Lightning Storm is summoned that deals additional damage to the surrounding area, and keep in mind that I didn't use my sword at all. Whether this behavior will remain in the game after the Edge of Fate patch does remain to be seen. Next up we have Destabilizing Rounds, or more specifically Volatile Explosions, which you should know are technically coded as Void ability damage. damage, meaning they're able to trigger things that are associated with ability damage triggers. The first example is proccing Devour by simply getting a bunch of weapon kills with a destabilizing rounds weapon and having the Feed the Void aspect equipped. The second though is far more interesting and actually rather powerful. As I'm sure we're all aware by now, standing behind a Storm's Keep barricade allows your weapons to discharge maximum bolt charge, but internally this weapon trigger is entirely separate from the regular ability trigger, meaning that if timed right you can actually trigger 2 lightning strikes at once, one from ability damage and one from your weapon damage. But here's the best part, a weapon with destabilizing rounds is constantly applying volatile to a target, and like I just mentioned, volatile counts as ability damage, so when you stand behind a barricade and shoot your destabilizing weapon, you're almost always guaranteed to trigger 2 lightning strikes at once. Next is a bit of a weird one, the Icebreaker exotic sniper rifle is able to cause ignitions by shattering a frozen target, which as it turns out isn't the only way to trigger ignitions with it. Oddly, dealing damage versus specifically a stunned barrier champion causes an ignition for every shot, which totally took me by surprise, and to be fair, isn't the most useful thing in the world, but very cool to be aware of nevertheless. Quickly before the video continues, I'd encourage you to join my community Discord server, as we'd love to have you. Plus, I've also added a new feature where you can gain some behind the scenes access to my videos by simply typing the code phrase password into the code words channel, so be sure to join up and enter the phrase. Bit of a smaller one here, but the Warlock exotic helmet Nezarec Sin works on any subclass. It doesn't have to be Void, so long as you're getting Void kills from whatever source, Abyssal Extractors will trigger, and with energy regen scaling off stats in Edge of Fate could in fact make this a very decent neutral game option. The exotic linear fusion rifle Lorentz Driver has a unique synergy with the Void Hunter on the Prowl aspect, where if you have both equipped at the same time, defeating the marked target from on the Prowl will also drop a telemetry data for Lorentz Driver provided you already have Lagrangian Sight active. This next one is more of a you should know this type of deal, and that's the fact that Vexcalibur has some unique combat benefits specifically when fighting Vex, because by default its projectile attack deals 25% more damage to Vex specifically, and the melee attack briefly disorients any non-boss Vex combatant, including Wyverns, which is rather nice for keeping things under control. Phoenix Cradle is a pair of Titan exotic boots that allow allies passing through your sunspots to also gain the Sol Invictus buff, and Sol Invictus has a rather unique property where while active, the drain rate of your super is decreased by 40%, letting it last significantly longer as a result. The best super to pair with this niche tech is actually Chaos Reach, because normally with Limit Break and Geomax stabilizers, your Chaos Reach is hitting for around 1.3 million damage, but if I constantly stand in my teammate's sunspot who's wearing Phoenix Cradle, my Chaos Reach lasts a lot longer than usual and is now able to deal 2 million damage instead, which is honestly pretty awesome. And further to this, Phoenix Cradle is actually receiving a buff in the Edge of Fate where supportive sunspots are becoming more visually discernible from regular ones and have a chance to spawn more of them when allies pass through. Next is a useful tip to know for the Edge of Fate, and that is the fact that being amplified grants you plus 50 mobility. And because in the Edge of Fate, mobility is no longer going to be a character stat, but rather a background one that cannot be influenced by armor that is being defaulted to a value of 40, if you're wanting to reach max mobility, then knowing that amplified gives 50 is quite useful, which in the Edge of Fate puts you at a total of 90 mobility whenever you're amplified. And if you're wondering where you can get the remaining 10 points to cap you at 100, then look no further than either lightweight weapons or the new enhanced athletics mod that's present on boot armor, since lightweight weapons provide plus 20 mobility when held, and the exact amount provided by the mod is currently unknown, but it's safe to assume that it's at least 10. So for all your mobility needs in the Edge of Fate, make sure you have a method of getting amplified and or a combination of lightweight weapons and enhanced athletics mods. Yet another important piece of Warlock knowledge applies to the person responsible for casting Well of Radiance, because specifically for them, their outgoing damage is classified differently. The Well caster's damage is in fact not weapon damage, but rather super damage that matches the element of your equipped weapon. So if I'm standing in my Well and shooting Carl with my Strand SMG, I'm technically dealing Strand super damage to him, and the most popular means of exploiting this fact is by placing Well, then swapping to a prismatic loadout featuring Sanguine Alchemy and a selection of useful fragments. For example, let's say that you're doing DPS with Queenbreaker. You place Well, then swap to a prismatic loadout with an Arc super equipped, giving you ×4 Arc Surge for the duration of the Well. Then if you also have both Facet of Courage and Facet of Solitude equipped, consecutive precision hits will sever the target, and because super damage is technically ability damage, which is technically your weapon damage, your Queenbreaker deals an additional 10% more damage to the target because of Facet of Courage. Oh, and don't forget the Sanguine Mark II, that's an even further 10% to what you're already doing. As I said, this only applies to the actual caster of the Well. Anyone else's damage is correctly coded as weapon damage, and and won't receive the previously mentioned benefits. But the big thing here is that in the Edge of Fate, having 200 super is known to increase your super damage by a further 45%, and if Bungie haven't changed how Well of Radiance is coded, then this could mean that well casters with 200 super will deal 45% more weapon damage by default simply because of this fact, which would actually be truly insane, which of course isn't accounting for the actual damage bonus that Well provides as well. This is just extra, so I can't wait to test this. Next is actually a very useful tech that is known as timer-based debuff extension, which essentially involves using Void Weaken effects to extend the duration of stronger timer-based debuffs, of which there are only 2 in the entire game, being Tractor Cannon and Felwinter's Helm. To perform this tech, simply apply your timer-based debuff of choice, which in this clip is Tractor Cannon, then shortly after apply your source of Void Weaken, which in this case is Child of the Old Gods, and as you can see, the damage of my auto rifle remains at the boosted 30% value for far longer than the original duration of Tractor Cannon, which is only 10 seconds, ending at a total 27 seconds of a 30% debuff with only 1 Tractor Cannon spent. This tech does not work with any tether variant since they aren't coded as timer-based debuffs despite themselves being on a timer. And actually, in the Edge of Fate, Felwinter's Helm is going to be able to extend its own debuff now because powered melee hits while wearing this exotic are going to apply Void Weaken. And yes, this is definitely very situational, but all the while a very important aspect of the sandbox to be in tune with. Next is a rather important gameplay conundrum that applies to all warlocks running Speaker's Sight. Normally, a healing turret from Speaker's Sight applies restoration ×1, but if you equip the Touch of Flame aspect, this becomes restoration ×2. However, this only applies to the maker of the turret. Your teammates that are getting healed by the turret still only receive restoration ×1, which as a result actually makes running Touch of Flame a bit of a throw, specifically in the case of playing support lock, because normally you don't have to worry about healing yourself, it's your teammates that need more of a boost, and because they don't benefit from you running Touch of Flame, you might as well run a different aspect instead. And as for my recommendation, I'd actually go with Icarus Dash, making the optimal support lock aspect pairing Icarus Dash and Helion. While on the topic of Icarus Dash, did you know that if you're in your Song of Flame super and have the Icarus Dash aspect equipped, you can actually perform 2 Icarus Dashes, even if you don't have the Heat Rises aspect equipped. The only caveat to this is that for some reason it won't work if you have the Celestial Fire melee equipped. You must have both Icarus Dash and Incinerator Snap on, and only then can you double dash while in super. Keeping it short and sweet for this next one, you should know that certain supers grant a varying number of your abilities back right after they end, with some examples being the Warlock Song of Flame, the Titan Glacial Quake, and the Titan Blade Fury. This next tip is aimed at Titans specifically, and that is to know when to leverage your abilities that offer damage resistance, more specifically Thunderclap and Rally or Towering Barricade. During the cast animation, Thunderclap grants you a whopping 80% damage reduction from all sources, which means that if you're in a pinch and potentially about to die, popping your Thunderclap might well save you since it reduces incoming damage by such a huge amount. And in a similar vein, both the Rally and Towering Barricades grant an 80% damage reduction to enemy splash damage when standing behind them, which again is a great way to massively reduce incoming damage. This next set of interactions concerns the Strand Warlock Weave Walk aspect, which number 1 counts as an air dodge for the purposes of reloading your weapons if used alongside the Rain of Fire exotic boots, which as you can see fully reload my rocket. But since the animation to enter and exit Weave Walk takes a little while, it's basically almost the same as normal reloading. But to be fair, it does reload all of your weapons, which a regular reload doesn't. Furthermore, when paired with Dawn Chorus, if you manage to scorch a group of ads right as you enter Weave Walk, the scorch ticks will still provide melee energy and effectively extend the duration of your Weave Walk, which I think is pretty neat. This next one is a bit of a silly one, and that is knowing how to store the Eager Edge perk and apply it to other weapons or abilities. If you equip your Eager Edge sword when the perk is ready, normally swapping weapons removes the perk, but if instead you cast your class ability like a dodge and swap weapons during the animation, when you exit the dodge you will still have the Eager Edge perk but on a different weapon, which for example allows you to skate with Ergo Sum swords or massively increases the lunge distance of certain melee abilities like Lightning Surge or Frenzied Blade. Like I said, a bit of a silly tech but pretty fun either way. The last 2 interactions are a little on the less impactful side but useful to know regardless, starting with Hunters running an Inmost Surturachne exotic class item, and this tip relates to the fact that if you grapple the floor, it only consumes half of your grapple charge yet still grants the full duration of Woven Mail for 10 seconds and triggers the increased ability regen from Heart of Inmost Light. And by the way, this build is getting massively buffed in the Edge of Fate since Ascension is finally going to be able to properly trigger Heart of Inmost Light, letting you get that grapple back even faster than before. Finally, the very last unique interaction is the behavior of Shoot to Loot on rocket sidearms, and this is me me simply bringing your attention to the fact that the pickup radius for shoot to loot is absolutely enormous on rocket sidearms. It's so forgiving, and you don't even need to aim all that perfectly. As long as the projectiles land anywhere close to the brick, it will be collected, which is useful for any raid or dungeon encounters where you need to quickly collect ammo after a damage phase without physically running over to the bricks. A good example of this is the Herald of Finality, where naturally the entire team is split up for basically the entire encounter. So there we have it. That's all 25 unique and important interactions you ought to be aware of before the release of the Edge of Fate. I hope you learned something new from this video and consider leaving a like and subscribing. It really means a lot. I'd also encourage you to swing by my Twitch channel as well, since I'm always helping out my community and generally having a good time there. I stream weekdays from 11 AM EST at twitch.tv/llama2, so do come say hi because we would love to have you. Anyway, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.